There are moments in life that change everything. Sometimes they come as a whisper, a fleeting thought. Other times, they come as a warm breath against your skin when you know, without a doubt, you were supposed to be alone. That's exactly what happened to me. I was washing dishes, lost in my own world, when I felt it. A presence, a heat behind me. And when I turned around, expecting my husband, I saw someone else. Cheating doesn't start the way people think. It's not always passion-filled encounters in dimly lit rooms. Sometimes, it starts with a single moment, unexpected, unplanned, but impossible to ignore. A moment that lingers in your mind long after it's over. That's what happened to me. And what I thought was harmless was anything but. Infidelity has a way of creeping in, making you question everything, including yourself. Maybe you've been there. Maybe you've felt that subtle shift, that pull towards something or someone you know you shouldn't want. Or maybe you're just here to hear a story, a real one, about how infidelity and cheating can start in the most unexpected ways. Either way, what I'm about to share is raw, real, and something most people would never admit. But today, I'm telling everything. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on the notifications, and hit the like button if you enjoy deep, real, and unfiltered stories like this. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because trust me, this is a story no one expects until it happens to them. I was lost in thought, hands deep in soapy water, savoring one of those rare moments of silence. The hum of the faucet, the faint clatter of dishes. It was oddly comforting. Then, out of nowhere, I felt it. A warmth, a breath. Right behind me. My body stiffened before my mind could even process it. My husband, Daniel, was still at work. So who? I didn't need to turn around. I knew. Lucas, my husband's best friend. I hadn't even heard him come in. A chill crept down my spine, despite the heat from the water. Lucas and Daniel had been friends since college, practically brothers. He had always been around, showing up unannounced, laughing too loud, making himself at home. But this was different. I could feel the weight of his presence behind me, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Too close. I forced a laugh, a weak attempt at normalcy. "You scared me," I said, hoping my voice didn't betray the unease curling in my stomach. He didn't step back. If anything, he lingered. "Didn't mean to," he murmured, voice low, almost intimate. A harmless comment, right? But something about the way he said it made my skin prickle. I gripped the sponge tighter, trying to focus on the mundane task in front of me. But my mind was racing. Was I imagining things? Overreacting? I had always considered Lucas harmless, just a little too comfortable in our home. But now, my instincts were screaming otherwise. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to act normal. "Daniel's not home yet," I said, hoping it would remind him that this wasn't his place, that he had no reason to be standing this close. Lucas didn't respond immediately. Instead, he just stood there, the silence stretching between us like a thin, invisible thread about to snap. I told myself it was nothing, but deep down something had shifted. I just wasn't sure what. The longer he stood there, the heavier the air became. It wasn't just that Lucas was close, it was the way he was close. Intentional, calculated. I could feel his eyes on me, studying me, like he was waiting for something. My hands kept moving, scrubbing the same plate over and over, as if that would somehow make the moment pass. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. But my pulse was betraying me, hammering against my ribs like an alarm I wasn't ready to acknowledge. Lucas let out a short chuckle, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah," he said, dragging out the word like he was testing its weight. Then, he leaned against the counter, too casual for how strange the moment felt. "Just thinking." His voice was lower than usual, more thoughtful, almost distant. But his body language said otherwise. He wasn't retreating. If anything, he was settling in, as if this moment, this uncomfortable, suffocating moment, was exactly where he wanted to be. I dried my hands, needing something to do, some excuse to put space between us. "Thinking about what?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. Lucas had always been a little unpredictable, but I had never felt like this before, like prey. He glanced at me, and for the first time, I noticed something in his eyes that I couldn't quite name. Amusement? Curiosity? Hunger? Whatever it was, it made my skin crawl. He smiled, slow, deliberate. "Just wondering if you ever feel unnoticed." His words hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. My stomach twisted, a sharp pang of warning shooting through me. This wasn't just casual conversation. This was something else. Something dangerous. And before I could stop myself, I wondered, what exactly was Lucas trying to say? His words clung to me, refusing to let go. Unnoticed. A single word, yet it felt like a door creaking open to something I wasn't ready to face. I forced a laugh, shaking my head as if he had just told a harmless joke. "Daniel and I have been together for years," I said, my voice too quick, too defensive. But Lucas didn't blink. He just watched me, like a man who already knew the answer to the question he hadn't asked yet. "You know, Emma," he murmured, stepping closer, "a man should never take his wife for granted." His tone was casual, but the weight behind it was anything but. My breath hitched. I could smell the faint trace of whiskey on him, mixed with something darker, something unspoken. My mind screamed at me to shut this down, to draw lines so thick it couldn't be crossed. And yet, I hesitated. Not because I wanted this, God, no, but because I could feel the shift happening, and I wasn't sure how to stop it. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my face, and I flinched. Not because it was aggressive, but because it was too soft, too familiar. "You deserve to be seen," he whispered. My throat tightened. It wasn't the words themselves. It was the way they seeped into the cracks I didn't even know existed. I hated it. Hated that for even a second, some small, buried part of me registered the attention. The validation. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. I took a step back, needing space, needing air. "Lucas, you should go," I said, my voice firmer this time. His eyes flickered with something unreadable, but he didn't argue. Instead, he let his gaze linger just a moment too long before nodding. "Of course," he said smoothly, as if this had been nothing more than casual conversation. But as he walked away, a cold dread settled in my stomach. Because something told me this wasn't over. Not even close. I thought that was the end of it. A moment of blurred lines, a mistake I could pretend never happened. But Lucas had other plans. He came back. Not days later, hours. The house was quiet. Daniel was still out, and I was foolish enough to think I could just forget. Then the knock at the door. Not urgent, not hesitant, just expectant. When I opened it, there he was. Lucas, leaning against the frame like he belonged there. "Forgot something?" I asked, keeping my voice light, though my fingers tightened on the doorknob. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped inside, too easily, too comfortably. "You know, Emma," he said slowly, as if we had unfinished business. I wasn't sure if I should come back, but he had. And as he closed the door behind him, I felt it again, that shift in the air, thick with something unspoken. I should have told him to leave. I should have made it clear that whatever this was, it wasn't happening. But before I could gather my thoughts, he reached for my wrist, just barely, just enough for my breath to catch. "Emma," he said, softer now, like my name was some kind of secret between us. And for the briefest moment, everything in me screamed to move, to end this before it began. Then, the unmistakable sound of a car pulling into the driveway. "Daniel." The moment snapped, like a rubber band stretched too far. Lucas's hand dropped, his expression unreadable. I took 2 steps back, heart pounding, as the front door swung open. Daniel stepped inside, smiling, oblivious. "Hey, babe," he said, pulling off his jacket. Lucas, ever composed, clapped him on the shoulder like nothing had happened. But I knew better. And as I stood there, pulse still racing, one thought echoed in my mind. What the hell had I almost done? I tried to erase it from my mind. A lapse in judgment, a moment of blurred lines that would never repeat itself. But the past has a way of lingering, doesn't it? Even when you pretend it never happened. Especially then. Days passed, and I told myself everything was normal. But normal didn't feel like being hyper-aware of every shadow, every sound. Normal didn't feel like the weight of unseen eyes pressing against my back. At first, I convinced myself it was paranoia, that my guilt was twisting my thoughts into ghosts. But then I saw him, Lucas. Not up close, not in my home, but lingering just far enough away to make me question if he was really there. A glimpse at the grocery store, a parked car outside when I was sure no one should be there. A feeling more than a sighting, like a presence I couldn't shake. Daniel didn't notice. He was wrapped up in work, in his routines, in me, the version of me that still pretended nothing had ever happened. I smiled, I cooked, I kissed him goodnight. And all the while, a part of me kept waiting for another knock at the door, waiting for Lucas to push further, to prove that night wasn't over, that the tension wasn't one-sided. And maybe, just maybe, I was waiting for something too. Not because I wanted it, God, no, but because once a line is crossed, even in the smallest way, you start to wonder where the next one is. And just like that, I realized something terrifying. Lucas wasn't haunting me. He was waiting. And the worst part? A part of me knew I was waiting too. Infidelity doesn't just happen. It builds moment by moment, in the spaces where doubt, desire, and deception collide. Maybe you've been on one side of it, or maybe you've been on both. The truth is, no one ever thinks they'll find themselves in this kind of situation until they do. And when that moment comes, what will you do? Will you ignore the signs? Will you let temptation pull you in? Or will you face the uncomfortable truth before it's too late? If this story made you think about trust, about relationships, about the fine line between loyalty and betrayal, then let me ask you this. Do you really know the people in your life? Do you know what they're capable of? Do you know what you're capable of when faced with the right or wrong circumstances? Because sometimes the biggest betrayal isn't what someone does to us, it's the lie we tell ourselves. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt that moment when something was off, when a boundary was crossed, when you saw the first warning sign of cheating? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's have this conversation because the more we talk about it, the more we understand what really happens behind closed doors. And before you go, make sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this. Because trust me, Someone out there is facing this right now, and they don't even see it coming.